Hey folks, Robbie Payne here with Chrome Unboxed again, coming at you today with the review of the Acer C720 with the i3 Haswell processor in it. For those of you who have been around the channel for a little while, I think this is the fourth of these devices that I've reviewed, including the original Acer C720 with the Haswell class Celeron, 2 gigs of RAM. Next was the Acer C720P, which is that model with a touchscreen. Then I came across the Acer C720P with 4 gigs of RAM and got it thinking I might change out and use that as my daily driver. Went ahead and did the review of it as well. And now we've come to the C720P with the i3 in it. So as most of you probably know, by the time you get into this video, the only difference in this guy, literally the only difference in it, is the fact that it is rocking the i3 processor versus the Haswell Celeron version in the other setups. And so the show that was done, the press release that was done, I want to say a month and a half ago or something like that, between Intel and Google, basically saying, hey, here's some of the new things that are coming in the world of Chromebooks. This guy was at center stage because it's the first Chromebook with an i3 processor in it. And while that is awesome and that is great, I have noticed some issues with it, some glaring issues, obviously. Because it's a C720 and it's meant to be a cheaper laptop. And so none of the things that in my previous reviews that I've said were negative about this device, none of those things are fixed. And instead, we now have the kind of same slightly troubled hardware with hopefully a better processor. We'll get into whether or not that pans out here in just a few minutes. First, I want to take a walk around the machine real quick. Again, this is going to be a repeat for a lot of people. Sorry about that, but if this is the first review you're watching, I want you to know that we'll talk about some of the hardware stuff. And so here's, we've got the USB 3.0 port, the combo headphone microphone slot, HDMI, and your charging port. Around the back, there are a spot for fans here. On the side, you get a USB 2.0, full-size SD card slot, Kensington lock. Across the front, just some LEDs, indicators that we're charging, that kind of stuff. And on the bottom, you've got ports for fans, ports for your speakers, and that's about it. Now this one does actually have 2 gigs of RAM. I know there is a 4 gig version out now, and I would highly recommend, if you're thinking about this machine, paying that extra money to get those. Because right off the bat, what I want to show you, again, I'm not going to get into the outside hardware parts. You can look at some of the other reviews. It literally is the exact same box. Still a bit fingerprint prone. It's difficult to say. You can kind of see here it collects fingerprints. I didn't clean it to begin with to show you that specifically. I mean, overall, the build quality feels sturdy. It's not really that issue for me with the Acer. It's more of an issue with kind of a cramped keyboard with slightly mushy keys, and every C720 I've had has this. It's one of the worst Chromebook typing experiences of the Chromebooks. I'll say that. It's not unusable. It's not terrible. It's just average at best. Same thing with the trackpad. It's okay. It's serviceable. It's a little jumpy. Slight movements don't register very well. Sensitivity is kind of low on it. But, you know, I mean, it works. Again, it's serviceable. It's okay. It's not great. So other than that, I mean, really the hardware stuff is all the exact same as it's always been on these C720 models, so I'm not going to spend any time on that. Feel free to check out the channel. Look at some of their other reviews of, again, the other 3 of these guys that I've got my hands on. What plagued me with this one was that I really expected a speed bump. I really expected a much faster Chromebook experience. I've gotten really used to, really comfortable with this Haswell Celeron and 4 gigs of RAM. That's kind of been my go-to device in the HP 14 for a while, and or like the Acer C720P with 4 gigs of RAM that I got a hold of. Those have been my normal daily drivers, and so with this particular device, I was really expecting. I knew that it has 2 gigs of RAM, no big deal, right? Most people don't even notice that. But for whatever reason with this one, I worked from it for a good 2 weeks. I actually lent my HP 14 to a friend who's considering Chromebooks. So I didn't have any choice. I worked and lived in this machine for a couple weeks on purpose. You know, I wanted to really spend some time with it, and I was severely let down by its performance. I didn't really notice. I'm just gonna be honest. I didn't notice any performance boost over the Haswell Celeron in the i3 on a day-to-day thing. And now I did run Octane, and I'm gonna have a video up comparing this guy, the HP14, and the Asus C300, which is running Bay Trail, so we can kind of see the three side by side together. But with this particular device, I just expected more, and maybe my expectations were out of range because from what I understand, the i3 isn't that much more powerful than the Celeron. It just has hyper-threading, so it's an I-class processor. So that could be part of it. I'm not really sure what the deal is. It could be the 2 gig RAM limitation. Just to make sure everything's out there. You see a lot of stuff open here. I wanted to make sure to show you what exactly I was talking about when I'm talking about performance issues, because what I have open right now is a normal daily thing for me. Now, granted, I push Chromebooks probably farther than some people would. My wife has the C720, the standard 199 version, never has any issue with it whatsoever. So I do want to say that there are people that are going to use this for basic web browsing. They're never going to think anything about it. But if you're considering using this for work or for school, where you're going to have multiple things up and multitasking is going to be a thing you're doing a lot, this is something to consider when we start talking about the 2 gig Chromebooks. And I don't care how fast the processor is in it, we still run into some issues. Let me show you. Right now I've got the Verge open. And just to show you, I do have Ubuntu running, and we've got one instance of Inkscape with nothing in it right now. So one program open, that's kind of fair. To be more fair, honestly, on what my normal use case would be, to be more fair would have to have something open here. And I think, let's see if I've got a drawing. Yeah, here we go. Okay, so just so that's taking up a little bit of RAM. Because again, this is a use case for me. So if you're somebody who's going, yeah, I want to install Ubuntu and have that kind of running on one side, and I have a handful of tabs open with a couple other tasks and streaming some music while I'm getting my work done kind of person, we need to be thinking about these things with 2 gigs of RAM. And so while scrolling isn't suffering here, I mean, this is The Verge. It's, a decently heavy site. If I were to go back to their homepage, which employs tons more media, we'll probably see a bit of a slowdown. Yeah, you're seeing a lot of jumping around here. Nothing's happening smooth just yet. It's starting to smooth out. But here's the deal. When I'm here, that's okay. I've got a couple things open. Oh, there we go. That just happened before I turned the camera on, actually. Google Docs has just crashed in the background on me. So those are all done. Well, that's giving life to these guys, because before these guys weren't quite loading. They were having a hard time when I was switching tabs. And like I said, I've got an instance of Google Drive with one doc and one spreadsheet open. I did have them open. They're not open now. I have one site that I've been working on open, not too terribly heavy. Another site, which is my website, open, and then a dashboard and WordPress open. And then The Verge. Down here, I've got a few Hangouts open, which is normal for me. I have a few clients that I've constantly got communication going with Hangouts, so that's normal for me. I've got Shift Edit open, which is an IDE, online IDE, FTP client editor, that kind of stuff. And so that's absolutely normal for me to have open. And then also I have the inspection from Google Chrome running in the background as well. And so those are the things I've got going right now. So this is it. That's not really that ridiculous amount of load. And we've seen Drive crash now. And we'll go and close it. We've already seen that. Let's just load up a couple other things here. Like I said, I'll get into some of the games, the Octane stuff when we do the side by side. It did beat everything in Octane. I want to say I got 13,000 and change, which the Haswell classes usually get 10 to 11,000. So it is a bump for sure. I mean, it's not like it's not boosted performance, but day-to-day performance, real-life performance, are those things being boosted? And I have to say, not really. Not really. Let's attempt to open. And then we're starting to slow down pretty good here. Let's see if I can get drive to open back up now. And we're starting to bog down and struggle here. What I found was happening when I have, this is what I was talking about, that it picked up pretty quickly. But what would start happening is I'd move away and start doing a couple tasks. And then the next thing you know, this is another thing I have open a lot. This will probably actually push it over the edge. Leave it open. Okay. Pixel or Touch-Up, fantastic image editor as far as getting just getting crops and that kind of stuff done. It does a pretty good job. So it's usually open as well, and he's holding tight pretty well. Usually about this time, again, Google Docs just crashed. That probably freed up some of the RAM. Usually about this time, when I would go back to my inbox, the whole thing would have to reload. Now go to this tab, and the whole thing would have to reload. And while that's not terrible, when you're working with all these tabs and actually doing all these things, it really becomes a problem. So if you're in the midst of doing stuff like that, if that's your regular work pattern, you like to have 6 to 8 tabs open and a couple other things running at the same time, make sure that you go for the 4 gigs of RAM. But other than that, I mean, and maybe it's just Chrome OS in general, I did not see much of a performance boost other than when I ran Octane. And so I'm going to close all this stuff down so this guy can breathe a little bit. Again, I'm not putting this thing through any processes that I wouldn't have while I was using it, and it happened on a daily basis. It became pretty obnoxious after a little while, trying to multitask and trying to go back and forth between a handful of things, which I've never had an issue on the HP 14. And I'm thinking, well, hey, here's this processor boost. Didn't really, and I've had some 2 gig machines before, and it didn't bother me that bad, but it really seemed troublesome on this one. And again, it could have been because of my expectations were a little bit higher for this guy having the Core i3. So bottom line, guys, this is the Acer C720. It's the same thing we've seen before. It's got a faster processor in it, but it's marginally faster. Is it faster in day-to-day stuff that you're going to do? If you don't run benchmarks and you didn't know that this had an i3 in it, would you know from performance that it's a different processor, that it's faster? My personal opinion, what I experienced, no, not really. I went back about 3 or 4 days ago back to my HP 14 as my daily driver. I got it back and have not once thought, man, I really miss that i3. I really wish I could go back to that. So for me, an i3 Haswell at this point, now we get to Broadwell, an i3 Broadwell might be something of a bigger thing. And if it had 4 gigs of RAM, I might feel very different. It might not get as bogged down. So I want you to take all those things into consideration if you're considering this particular device. At the price tag, if you went with the $199 version with the Celeron in it instead, you're going to save quite a chunk of change. And I personally, again, I just don't feel like you're going to suffer that much in performance. So take that for what it's worth. Stay tuned. I'm also going to have probably launching all these videos almost at the same time because I got these devices all at the same time. So I'm actually in the process of doing a review for the Acer C300, and then we're going to do a side-by-side. So these videos are all probably going to show up. So check the channel. Look in there and see. There will be a side-by-side comparison. If it isn't already up, it will be coming up soon. So you can kind of see how these things do a couple different tasks comparing with one another. So other than that, guys, I still like the C720. I really do at its price point, but I like it better as a $199 Chromebook. When you start getting up in the higher prices, the hardware deficiencies really bug me, and the what is an almost imperceivable bump in performance by the i3 just was not impressive to me. And so I would have to steer you more back towards the $199 Chromebook for now. Things may change. Who knows? We have the first Tegra Chromebook coming up, so a lot of exciting things happening. More hardware coming, more new laptops and new kind of instances of Chrome coming. So keep it locked to the channel for all those things. As many things as I can get my hands on, I will do reviews on. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Subscribe to the channel if you have not already. And if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. Post them to Google+. I will get to them as soon as I possibly can, I promise. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, guys, have a good one.